Good afternoon. Lovely. It's an absolute pleasure to see you all here today. My name is Siobhan Jackson. I'm the Director of Adult Education here at Nehemiah. I like to say that when people ask what I do, I sort of direct and help facilitate and administer all of the Justified Anger courses based on the Justified Anger Initiative, based on the Justified Anger article. We've been doing this obviously for 10 years, but actually Justified Anger, the article came out a little bit over that. And it is an absolute pleasure to be in the room with all of you folks who have been around for most of those 10 years, folks who have been key players, as well as participants, because all of those roles are very important. I actually come from a theater background, and one of the things we say is there are no small parts, only small people. I'm not sure why that's the saying. I don't get the small people part. But there are no small parts, and every one of you in this room is important to this mission. 10 years of work has gone into this, and we hope that it continues. This is the first of 2 breakout sessions. This session will repeat in for the second half of our breakout session. So if you had signed up for both education, you may be getting a little bit of the same thing, and you may want to try a different session, but know that you aren't missing out. There will be another chance to go to a different session. So without further ado, let me then introduce our panelists today for our education panel. First, we have Dr. Christy Clark Pujara, professor and department chair, I believe, of the history of Her research focuses on the experiences of Black people in the British and French North America in the 17th and 18th and early 19th centuries. She's particularly interested in retrieving the hidden and unexplored histories of African Americans in the areas that historians have not sufficiently examined, small towns and cities in the North and Midwest. So thank you for being here. And then, of course, we have Kaleem Caire. Kaleem Caire is the founder and CEO. Where is that coming from?
Somebody's giving away free money.
Kaleem is the founder and CEO of One City Schools, the operator of the One City School program and One City School elementary program, preschool and elementary. I believe you're trying to get into all the way up to high school at this point, right?
High school right now.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Thank you for being here, Kaleem Caire. So before we kind of get into a longer discussion between the two of you, I wanted to give them both some time to sort of talk about what they've put into this programming, this work. 10 years of work. I know Dr. Christy has been putting lectures together for much longer than that. And so many of them we've been blessed to share with you, all of you. But please go ahead, tell us about all your work.
I'm gonna have to jump down and get my notes. Don't laugh, because I'm sure. All right. So, then I have to jump back up. You're not short, it's just a high school. That's true. Well, first I want to thank everybody for being here, and it's lovely to see so many folks that I know in this space, and you know, just remaining committed to this work. And so my work with Justified Anger really began in 2017. When actually the year before that, 2016, when Dr. Reverend G asked me to put together some lectures. And I've told this story a lot, but I always go back to it because I think it gives an example of how much I've learned and how much I've gained from Justified Anger. I wanted to say no. I was on the tenure track. I, had 2 very young children then. They're young now, and they're 9 and 13. But at the time, they were babies, and I was just trying to get tenure at UW-Madison. And he's asking me to to create lectures that I usually would do over a month and turn it into 2 lectures. And I was like, what? I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I want to do that, but I didn't want to say no to a pastor because I was brought up in a very religious home, and he was really nice. And my colleague had told me what a great program it was. My colleague, historian Stephen Kantowitz. And I said, okay, fine, I'll do this. It won't work. And then it'll be done. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I sincerely, that is the point of view that I came at it from. And Justified Anger literally changed my life, personally and professionally. I've collaborated with a lot of organizations. I've always cared about my work outside of academia, outside of the university setting. And that's largely because of who I am and how I was raised. I am an unlikely academic. I grew up in a working class home. My father was functionally illiterate, but the smartest man I ever knew, had a series of jobs that were union paid. And so I grew up with a lot of stability. He was a garbage man, helped organize garbage workers in Omaha, Nebraska. Before I was born, he was a packing house worker, and was part of the UPWA, United Packing House Workers of America. When I was older, he was a teamster. He loaded trucks for PIE Trucking, and he was also a custodian at the Omaha Public Schools. And so my dad, although he was functionally illiterate, like I said, the smartest person that I knew. And I had a lot of stability. My mother was the first in her family to graduate high school. She helped integrate an 18-month nursing program at St. Mary's in Omaha, Nebraska. And she became an LPN, and was in and out of the workforce as it was needed for my family. And so I grew up working class, but working class with a lot of stability. And my parents were very focused on education. They wanted us to have the opportunities that they did not. This was hard for me because I was not a stellar student. I was a pullout kid, as it was called. Sometimes they call it chapter 1, where, you're so far behind your peers that you can't be in the green group, that, a resource teacher has to come in and take you out for individual tutoring. That was my life from kindergarten to 3rd grade, in both reading and math. I'm really grateful that I was in a school district that had the resources for that kind of intervention. I was pulled out by Miss Carter 4 days a week, from the time I was in kindergarten through 3rd grade. And, I had a lot of shame around that because all the kids know why you're leaving for reading time, right? Or why you're leaving for math time. But I learned a lot in that process. I learned how to study. I learned how to persevere. And, by the time I was in 4th grade or so, I was doing well. But I had become very studious because I never wanted that to happen again. And so I just became that student who, if I didn't understand something, I was going to stay behind, ask the teacher about it, get it figured out. And that strategy actually was really helpful for me throughout junior high and high school and into college and even in grad school. So I've never been someone who just got it. I am still a slow reader. I am still a slow writer. I've just come to accept that that is my process and embrace it rather than have shame around it. And I like to talk about this because I didn't hear a lot of folks talking about this. And when you're surrounded by academics, most of my colleagues, they've been STAR students the entirety of their life, right? Like nobody's surprised that they're professors. A lot of people would have been surprised that that's where I ended up. But so I was always interested in getting outside of academia, for my work to mean something to people outside of that really restrictive elitist structure. And Justified Anger has given me an avenue to do that because I didn't quite know how to do it, right? How can I be this academic, but also be someone who is involved in my community, who is influential in my community, and how do I bridge the two? And so I'm so grateful to Dr. Reverend G for giving me that opportunity. I've collaborated with a lot of organizations in Madison and Wisconsin, from the United Way to the YWCA to the Madison Metropolitan School District, state senators, Wisconsin Historical Society, the Dane County Libraries, several Wisconsin University System schools. But my deepest and most impactful engagement has been with Nehemiah. I've been a lecturer for Justified Anger since 2011. And what I have most learned has been about relationships. Dr. G has become a mentor and a friend, and he has demonstrated the importance of building relationships with people. And so I have been so appreciative of that. And he has modeled how to connect with the community in a meaningful way. And I think the most important thing that I've learned is how to listen, how to lean into the discomfort that I have as being part of the university and never quite feeling at home there, and wanting to bridge the so-called town gown divide. I really kind of get irked when I hear that, because it is so artificial and it doesn't have to be there. And I think the folks on the university side are often thinking about what they can give to the community, what they can teach the community. And what I've learned is we have a lot to learn from the community, and that we need to spend a lot more time listening to what the community has to tell us. I've also learned to be bold, to dream big. I didn't think that Justified Anger would last more than a couple years. And I was proven wrong, and I'm so glad that I was really wrong. But in learning to dream big and think boldly has really been something that I'm trying to do more of. And when I think about what I want to do in the future with Nehemiah and the Center for Black Excellence, I'd like to see the creation of a Saturday school for Black students. We often lament at the university the terrible numbers that we have. And I mean, the data is dismal. The university has never had more than 3% of its students be African American. This year we're at 2. I check every year. We have not been able to move the needle at all. Right? 3% is the highest we've ever been. We're currently at 2%. And I think about that a lot, and how we can change that. And a couple of years ago, my department hired this just really incredible, bright, enthusiastic professor, and her name is Jessica Stovall. Do you mind going to the people and to the faculty? And if you go all the way down, you'll see the social scientist. I just want you to see a picture of her. Her name is Jessica Stovall. She was an undergraduate at UW-Madison, went and taught in the public school systems for nearly 12 years, then decided to go back and get a PhD in education. And then we hired her 2 years ago. And she misses teaching at the high school level. And like I said, I often think about how can we really move the needle? We need to be present in the community. We can't wait until people are in their senior year and go, oh, did you know there's a Department of African American Studies at the university? Right? We need to meet them when they are junior high and middle school. They need to know who we are and what we do, and we need to meet their needs. I would love, and we've been applying for grants. We haven't been successful so far, but we're continuing to apply for grants. We envision wraparound services, right? So the students would earn a stipend for attending a Saturday school, because we know for some students that means that they can't get a job, right? And we don't want that to be a barrier. We want them to have access to a mental health counselor. We want them to receive 2 meals while they're there. We want them to have a relationship with a future plans coach, right? Because, a 4-year university is not for everyone. But everyone needs a plan as to what they want to do in the future, whether that's the trade, apprenticeships, thinking about opening a business, right? And so that they have someone to talk to and that they meet the faculty, that we would come in and we would do guest lectures and we would answer their questions. But more importantly, we would have an opportunity to listen to these students, for them to tell us what they need. What kind of department and university do they want to come to? And as of now, that's just not something that we do. And I think it's something that we very much need to do. We need to meet their parents. We need to meet the people in the community that care about them. And we need to learn what we have not done. Because the department has been around 55 years. It was born of student activism. It exists because of the 1969 Black student strike, right? We have an obligation to our birth in activism to give back and to listen and to be receptive, because we wouldn't be here without the activism of students. And I really think that we need to pay more attention to what we need to do. Versus this kind of, we're going to tell you what you need. And so those are the things that I've been spending some time thinking about and I really want to do in the future. And I'll stop talking. So
I think we'll have a chance to jump back into certain things if you think of another thing. 'Cause I love when you speak, I really do. But I'll turn it over to you, Kaleem. Do you have just some words before we kind of get into maybe some of the deeper
I'm
questions?
gonna give you a very speed version of my biography. People understand why I do what I do. Born here, 1971, Old Methodist Hospital on West Washington Avenue, Caire, Caire, Curtis Frederick. My mom lived on the streets most of her life, although everyone who knew her knew she was brilliant. She had a genius level IQ, but she was a misfit. And my grandfather unfortunately treated her like that. My father was in and out of prison. They knew each other. And once he got out of jail, he saw her, convinced her to let him take her to his house to get a meal. And instead, he forced himself on her, and out came me. Mm-hmm. So I tell people I was born a revolutionary. And raised by my aunt. My mom couldn't take care of me for very long, so I was bounced around from household to household in my family. First, my Aunt Dolores, she had too many kids. They wouldn't let her take care of her. My mom was upset that she took me, so she threatened to put me up for adoption if she raised me. I went to my Aunt Patsy's house. She didn't have a big enough house based on the county, so then I ended up with my Aunt Gretchen, who was 23, pregnant with her own child. My family moved her into a house, or apartment, a townhouse on Fisher Street, 2130 Fisher Street, 1 block from where our preschool is. And I grew up across the street from the basketball courts at Penn Park. Went through school, went through kindergarten at Franklin Elementary School. My family was upset about all the segregation issues. My grandfather was a Black Louisiana Catholic. They pulled us out of school, sent us to Catholic school. So from 1st through 7th grade, I went to St. James. And then I convinced them to let me go back to public school, because there was a girl I was chasing in 8th grade. If you know Kim Hudson, tell her I put her name on there. Unfortunately, she liked Daryl Sanders and not me. So I chose the school for the wrong reason. And not only that, when I got there, I was shocked to walk into the cafeteria and see a school that had a sea of kids, but it was a sea of white kids. All the Black kids were sitting at the back tables, a few Latino kids and Asian kids beside them, and there was a sprinkling of those Black students throughout. And that was my first time being introduced to segregation in a school. Because even though I went to St. James, we had 40 kids in the classroom. I had Ishmael Ozan, our DA, in my classroom, people like that. We had diversity, and we weren't that segregated. I also was introduced to the underachievement of Black students. All of us could read, write, and compute at St. James. I was an A student up to that point, AB student. Got there and became a DF student at Cherokee, because that's how they treated us. I saw so many of my peers who couldn't read, write, and compute, and teachers would say stuff about them in class, in the middle of class, and I was always a fighter. So I started saying something, trying to advocate for them, and then they started treating me like that too. Going to West High School, was always the only black kid. I only had 3 classes with black students my whole high school career. I graduated high school with a 1.56 GPA because I hated going to class. I would just go to take tests and just basically pass. I was smart enough. Graduated high school with a group of 8 young black men. But when I looked at my yearbook in freshman year, there were 38 of us. And most of them did not graduate from high school. Some of them still haven't graduated. Left, went to the military, went to the Navy because I wasn't academically prepared to go to college. And then ended up doing really well, got leadership opportunities very quickly. Became the leader of my troop in boot camp. I was the second youngest. I was 17 because my birthday's in July, I went in June. And I had 96 guys in my troop. The oldest was 34 years old. And we ended up winning an award from H. Lawrence Garrett III, the Secretary of the Navy, for being the first group in 14 years to get through without any demerit points. We called it street marks. And then that's when I realized I had leadership ability.
I guess.
Went on and then ended up in Virginia. And that's where I met my now former wife, Lisa, at Hampton University. And went to a black college for 1 year. Spent time hanging out there while I was stationed across the water in Norfolk. Michelle Nichols, who's the president of our board of education, her brother Carl, they were best friends of mine, and Carl was going to school there. So I got introduced to Black excellence and what it really looks like. Madison doesn't know what that looks like. We can talk about it, but we don't know what that looks like. Here, we let kids right now in high school, the floor for grades is 50%. You cannot get below 50% in the Madison high schools right now. So if a kid doesn't come to school, they get a 50%. If they come 30% of the time, they get a D. How many of you were able to get a D by doing 30% of your work? At Hampton University, they pushed us hard. I wrote more papers there in 1 year than I wrote in my 3 years at UW, my first 3 years here. That's how hard it was because they were trying to push us because they knew a lot of us came from schools where we had talent, but we weren't prepared. So when I came back to Madison, I was pre-med. I was 4.0 GPA when I transferred to Madison. So from a 1.56 to a 4.0. I was in an honors college. I was on my way and hanging out in an old neighborhood on the south side, which is now the Boys and Girls Club, and started tutoring kids and saw more kids on the street than in school. And I started to ask the question, what's going on? Why are the kids on the street, not in school? My friends were selling drugs, doing all kind of crazy stuff at that point. I was so glad that I left Madison because I probably would have fallen into that also. And nobody had any answers. So I started to volunteer even more and then switched my major to education. After meeting Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, Michael Olnick, Bill Tate, who's now president of Rutgers, was at LSU. They helped me create my degree at UW because when I switched, I was in broadfield science. I was going to be a physics and chemistry teacher and decided after going into those methods classes, I was like, Dante and Daquita are not going to learn like this. And so they were not preparing us to really teach our kids effectively. So they let me create my own degree with Dr. Ladson-Billings and others in urban education. And my whole focus was how do we fix the schools so that our kids can produce. I'm a proponent of independent Black education. A lot of people, because they say, oh, you're a charter, you're anti-public school. I don't know what drug people are smoking, but I'm not on that drug. I come from the old school, which I know you know about. A lot of slavery, our people developed their own schools. We didn't trust master to educate us. And so I came out of the same mindset that why would I trust the people who undereducated us to educate us?
Right.
So I decided I was looking at other options of how we could fix the system and develop our own schools. I ran into Howard Fuller in Milwaukee. At the time, I should tell you, the school's a whole program that people tutor in that was built around a model that me and Mimi Block created at the university when I was a student. The people program that kids go to at UW, that was me telling Paul Barrows and Cleveland James and Walter Lane and everybody affiliated with the UW Systems Plan 2008 program at a study we did when I was the youngest consultant at DPI on minority student achievement in 1997. I hadn't even graduated from college yet. And we weren't graduating half of our Black kids or Latino kids. The state didn't want to publish the study. So when I met Howard and we started the Black Alliance for Educational Options, which took me from Madison to Milwaukee to Marquette University, then to DC, I commissioned a study nationally with some funds that I was able to raise. And that's why we talk about graduation rates around the world now. I commissioned the nation's first study in 2001. And with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded it. And then they worked with us to fund something called, we're looking at college readiness. And so then they funded achievement first. They funded a lot of different programs that they were working on Common Core. I was invited by the U.S. Secretary of Education, Rod Page, to be on the panel that advised the U.S. Congress and the White House on evaluation and implementation of No Child Left Behind. I was 30 years old. 30 years old. Barely graduated from high school. Then when Obama was elected, I was invited by him to be vetted with 1,500 other people. I was chosen out of 62 extra reviewers for his Race to the Top initiative. So when he announced that in Madison, Wisconsin, I couldn't tell anybody that I was one of the extra reviewers yet because they hadn't announced it. I was the only person from Wisconsin, one of only 3 black males, and the youngest at the table. So I served a 5-year appointment under Bush. I did that work for Obama. Came back home after leading efforts in Washington, D.C. to get all the options that kids have there. My job was to be the guy who spearheaded that work. It's $1.6 billion that's been invested in education in Washington, D.C. as a result. Came home with the objective of trying to do the same thing, knowing that I would be met with tons of hardship when I took on the Urban League job. And it was Lamar Billups and Annette Miller who convinced me, along with Chuck Taylor, to come back. So I came back, first left my family in Maryland for 18 months because I know how I am and I know how Madison is. I was like, if they run me out of here, we haven't changed our lifestyle in Maryland. And so when I came here, I told the board what I was going to do. And when I dropped that Madison prep school, Madison went crazy. And they go more crazy, Dr. Pujara, about changing the system than they do about 2% of our kids continuing to be at UW.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so people mistake me for a guy who's a right winger, who hangs out with the right wing, who sells out the progressives. I'm independent. I'm not a part of anybody's party. My people became free in 1865. I enjoy being a free black man. I am a no person's plantation, but I love some people on each one. So here we are today, sitting here in One City's schools, founder and CEO. Nothing I've ever done have I done by myself, but Madison has benefited from a lot of the things that I've done, including when Tony Evers signed that $2.6 billion increase, unprecedented in education. Who spearheaded that effort? Behind the scenes. And we're doing something very similar right now. So one thing I only want from Madison, only one thing, I just want 2 words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop dissing me on social media. Stop talking trash about my kids and my family. We've been given to this city since my family came here in 1907. And my grandfather's uncle was the executive messenger, the secretary of 5 Wisconsin governors from 1922 to 1936 when he died. And he used that to try to get a house in Madison for us, which ultimately became the neighborhood house over on Regent Street. And he was the first one to try to bring an urban league back, to bring the urban league to Madison. So his picture used to hang there, but nobody knew who he was. That's why I came back to fulfill a family legacy.
I just want to second something you said about Black excellence. Something that we've noticed, and we try to scream it up the hill. When I say up the hill, I'm talking about Bascom Hill, as often as we can, is when Black students take classes in the Department of African American Studies, and when they get a certificate, something happens. Their GPAs go up. But we don't have any kind of concerted effort to encourage Black students to take classes in African American Studies. Instead, they often get told, what are you going to do with that?
Very good questions. Both of you have talked a little bit about just the breadth of your work, your entire histories. One of the questions that we've been tasked to ask you with is what you're envisioning for the future. So, and Dr. Christy, you've talked about a Saturday school, the idea of a Saturday school, but you also mentioned bridging that town and gown divide and meeting the needs before they enroll, before they're just enrolling for college and university. And I just wondered if you both had any thoughts about, some of the things that are being done already, things that need a little bit more amplification, either at your programs or other programs you've heard about.
So, Dr. Virginia Henderson founded the African American Ethnic Academy, and I believe she started that, it was 1995, 94, 95, and that's how I became a teacher. I started teaching in that program on Saturdays, and it used to be at Edgewood College. And at first, like everything that Madison does, 'cause I know the history of Madison Public Schools, this community, what they've done with us, I've studied it. They don't know what to do when we start stuff, so then they try to figure out how they can be a part of it. Then they started funding it, and then within 5 to 6, 7 years, and things come up, they start cutting those funds. The program became over-reliant on the district's 180 fund, and when they were no longer able to fund it, the Madison Community Foundation stepped in for a little while, but ultimately weren't able to keep it going. It was an awesome program for our children. Awesome program for our children. Promega was involved with it for a long time, teaching a summer course over at their spot for a while, for actually a long time. And where I'm at now, because I think that would be extremely beneficial to have something like that at the center.
What was the name of that program?
The African American Ethnic Academy. I'll give you guys my email later. I'll send you, I did a whole thing on it, so I'll send it to you so you can read the history of it. But I'm about changing institutions around the needs of our kids. So what I believe needs to happen today is that the school systems that our children attend need to be reconfigured and remolded around the needs of the students that they serve. Right now, there is no general math class in any high school in Madison, except at Capitol High and maybe, I don't know, at Shabazz. But when we had to close our 9th and 10th grade at one city, because the kids came to us, 87% of them were 2 to 3 grade levels behind. 67% were at a 1st and 2nd grade level. We started a program that gets your kid ready for Harvard, for UW, and our kids weren't ready for that. And the behavior showed it. When we were testing them, I ended up having to go in and teach math, because we had 2 math teachers quit sequentially because of the behavior of some of our kids. But I was able in 2 weeks to get them focused. There was one young man, when we had closed our school, I took him to West High School. Because I chose that because it was my alma mater. We all chose schools we were going to help our kids integrate to. And I went to sign them up. They told me they don't have any general math classes. I said they were going to put him in geometry because he was in 10th grade. I said, he's not going to succeed in geometry. I'm like, you don't have any class? They said, Kaleem, this is where we could use your help with the administration. So then I dive into it more, and what I find out is the West High parents fight everything that could benefit our kids. They fought Carlton Jenkins on his Earned Honors program to try to free up more opportunities for our kids to have those kind of classes. Libby Burmeister would tell you, I had a conversation with her years ago where I was advocating for the same thing. And she told me, Kaleem, if I make classes available to those students, these parents, these boosters are going to be in here threatening my job, and MMSD's administration is going to let them take it. Because if I only get so many allocations of teachers and classes, so if I take away that, they want their honors classes, they want their AP classes, they want those things. So you guys, so my answer to your question is, I am totally disinterested in playing around with the past. I am not interested in staying in the present. I am only interested in creating the future. And anybody who volunteered at our schools aren't perfect. We're climbing the mountain with our kids. But the first thing you have to do with a Black child is you have to help them feel good about who they are. They have to be grounded in a strong sense of identity as an achiever, and I can be an achiever. Not be like you, but be like me. And this city fights to be like me all the time. They don't value it. And so we can't have courses like that in our schools. We can't have schools built around the needs of our kids in this city. People lose their, I want to say the SHIT wherever they lose it. So I could say a lot more other than Madison has the potential to be successful, but this progressive mindset that we live with stands in the way of it. I fear progressives more than I do right-wing Republicans. And I do. And it's because I've lived and grown up in a progressive environment. And today, 99% of our kids here, 0% in Verona, 0% in Middleton, and only 2% in Sun Prairie are academically prepared to go to the UW-Madison. 93% are prepared to go to any college. So why would I be supportive of a mindset that has produced failure over and over again? So you guys, I'm here today, honestly, so I can say this, so we can start to produce some change because we can right here.
Yeah, I second a lot of what you say.
I just speak the truth.
And I see it on the other end. So I see students who, they beat the odds and they got to UW-Madison. And right now I'm talking specifically about Black students. I think white students get a lot of, I know white students get a lot of benefit from taking courses in the Department of African American Studies. And we were born inclusive. We've had, about half our majors, minors, certificates not be Black from the very beginning. We've always been that way. I always show my students at the beginning of every class why the Department of African American Studies exists. Yes, it was the 1969 Black student strike, and who was standing behind them from State Street to Bascom Hall? Thousands of white students. Like, we exist because the student body said we should exist, not because some group of professors or any administrators, and this department belongs to us all. But I have seen it transform Black students in tangible ways. I've seen students who are, they took the intro class. I teach Introduction to African American History, and their heads were down, and their heads were down at the end of class, right? And they're like, I don't know why I keep taking these classes, but I feel like I need to. It's like, because they're telling you who you are, and they make you feel good about yourself. It is hard to excel in an environment where you are 2 to 3% of the population. You rarely see anybody who looks like you. And I say this as someone who went to schools like this. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. I went to predominantly white schools. I had one Black teacher in 3rd grade, Miss Montgomery, and that was probably the best year I had. And I never had a Black professor, not one. And it breaks my heart every time a student comes up to me at the end of the semester and so very shy looks at me and goes, I've never had a. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And it's hard. It's hard to sit in classes where your self, your family, your community is not celebrated or centered. I get angry every year that I teach, every semester, every class, because I hear the same things over again. I used to be ashamed of the history of slavery, and I'm not anymore. They shouldn't have to wait to college for that, but they are. And it has affected how they think about themselves, because I have been them. If you had told me in high school that I would be a history professor and that I would be an expert in America, I would have laughed in your face. Because I wanted nothing to do with it. And I remember thinking, like, how can I get out of the classroom, the 1 or 2 times we talk about Black people, because it's going to be like slavery, and then one day they decided civil rights were important. And it's incredibly damaging. It's damaging emotionally, It's damaging psychologically not to ever see yourself reflected at the front of the room. And I don't think we talk about that enough, and how that impacts folks. Because, like you, Kaleem, my sister went to Spelman, which is an HBCU, right? And she moved to Atlanta and never came back, right? I visited her when I was a sophomore, and it transformed how I thought about myself. I had seen a different world, but it was a TV show, and I didn't know that that was a real thing. That was real, right? And you don't see that. I associated Black neighborhoods with poverty until I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and was like, oh, that's not what that means at all. And this is why I'm really trying to do everything I can. And if anybody has ideas, suggestions, please share, to get a Saturday school in a Black-run, Black-affirmed space taught by Black studies professors. I don't think that there's anything that could be more impactful for our students. To see themselves everywhere. Well, who started the center? Who's running the center? Who's teaching in the center? Right? And it's very frustrating. We applied for a bunch of grants and it's, oh, this is a great idea, but we have no money for you. And I'm liking all of the plans that have been done. One of my colleagues, and I'll stop talking after this, I promise. I used to think he was a bit of a curmudgeon. And he retired about 2 years after I started at UW. So I started in 2009. Yeah, he retired in like 2011, 2012. And something he gave me when he walked away was a folder. And in that folder were all of the plans that UW-Madison, all the self-studies that UW-Madison had done about race. And nothing changed. Right? It's the Our Madison Plan. It's the Achievement Gap Plan. They've been doing these plans since before I was born and haven't moved the needle. But then when you come with a different idea, there's no funding. There's no energy. And I'm thinking, well, all that other stuff didn't work. What's the harm in trying something else? And so it can be really frustrating, but this is why I was so excited about working with Nehemiah. Because what I learned from Dr. G and the staff at Nehemiah is don't wait, find a way to do it yourself.
Wow.
We got a question.
I understand neither of you work for Madison School District, but my question was going to be, and it still is, if you were the superintendent of Madison Schools for 3 years with a cannot be fired if we don't like what you're doing clause in your contract, what would you do? Now, you've already explained you would make a priority of those Saturday schools that you were taught by African Americans. And you've already explained, sir, that you would organize the classes around the academic needs of the students and bring back things like the academic academy. But in more specifics, if you could be the superintendent, what would you do?
Recruit teachers from HBCUs and pay them what they need to be paid to be here. And focus on reading, and then reading again, and then a little more reading. That's what I do.
Kevin Kastner, who was the search consultant for previous to, not Joe, called me to apply for this job. So I don't have a PhD, so I don't need one, Kaleem. He was on my team, race to the top. Felt needed a person like me. I would free our teachers from this BS education we've been giving our kids. The high stake testing that we're doing, if you're over the age of 40, you did not have to submit to high stakes testing.
That's right.
Your parents were not looking at test scores to determine schools. They were looking at GPAs. They were looking at the course offerings. They were looking at who were the best teachers in those schools. That's what they were making the decisions on. I was at the table when those decisions were made at the federal government, and I was in tears at the table when they decided not to put all the funds, and it was a Democrat and Republican issue. They decided not to put all the funds to put professional development, all those things on the table. They wanted to leave it to the states. And so we had an unfunded mandate. And now we're all chasing test scores. So what happens is now we're all trapped there. If you're in a school, so here's what I do. I take all my best teachers and I pay them a little bit more to go into schools where our kids have the greatest challenges. You need them with the best teachers. Instead, those of you who tutor at my school, we have some good teachers, we have some very young teachers too, who are gonna put points on the board for our kids for a while. It takes them a while to develop the abilities to become a great teacher. But still, once people look at those test scores, one city is the worst school district in Dane County is what Wisconsin State Journal said. We're 92% students of color, mostly Black. We are 70% poverty trending towards 80%. And 20% special needs trending towards 30. There's no school like that in Dane County or anywhere around here, not district or whatever.
That's right.
But when you compare our kids who we serve to the kids in the other districts, we outperform them. And I do it with half the public funding. We only get half the funding that MMSD gets to produce half the result that we're producing. Imagine what would happen if I get all that money. So if I did, I would reconfigure our instructional program around the needs of the students. I would provide those kids that need more time, more intensive learning. I'd take away a couple of specials at the K through 3 level, and I would put them more in reading. So first there would be understanding the phonetic awareness of reading, getting the support. Then they would be doing some demonstration of reading, doing it themselves. And then I'd have them with our tutors who are trained in or Gillingham and everything, right? So that we can move them forward. And you get them really young, you can move them forward faster. But I would reconfigure the system around those needs. And if I had kids with really high ability, I'd do ability grouping. Why not? Ability grouping. Kids who are really high, they should be held back in the classroom. I'd have them in classrooms of their ability. And then the goal is to get all the kids moving.
Amen.
So I would do some basic things like that, but I would free our teachers from this madness that we call education, because it is not education.
Were there any other questions? Yeah, please go ahead.
Not a question, just an observation for Christy. When you were describing the Saturday school, what it might look like, how it might be run, the Black Center comes to mind. And I just wonder if there might be room for your program, maybe not right at the outset, because it would take some more fundraising, to house it at the Black Center.
That was our plan. That's in our proposal, that it be held at the Center for Black Excellence, right? That is where the classes would be held. That's where all the specials would be. It would be in that building, that they would be in an affirming Black space. Yeah, that's in the proposal.
What proposal is that, Christy?
So we, the most recent one we applied for was the Baldwin grant, right? So we have gone and applied for major grants. We have the Department of African American Studies and the Center for Black Excellence already has an MOU. We already have that. It's signed. The Center for Black Excellence is a partner of the College of Letters and Science. The Department of African American Studies is in Letters and Science. We're an official conduit. Everything is in place. What we don't have is money, right? We applied for the Baldwin. We applied for $150,000 as a pilot to get it started. We have Professor Jessica Stovall is a superstar. She has an award-winning PhD. She's from Wisconsin. She went to the University of Wisconsin. She taught in some of the toughest schools in Chicago for 12 years, went back and got her PhD. And here she is, poised and ready and eager to start a Saturday school, and we can't get any money.
Really, $150,000 would do it?
That's what we applied for in our first grant, to get it off the ground. And she also has graduate students who then want to study the school. So then we would know what's going on. If you go to the website, if I find it really quick.
It's not mirrored, so apologies.
Okay. So if you go up and go to programs, actually just go to the home again. And go to programs. Go to the Soulful Collective. This is new in our department. It is an education lab. These are our undergraduate and graduate students who, for the first time this year, we were able to get cobbled together a little bit of funding. They're studying Black education outcomes. These are graduate students in our department and undergraduates who want to study a Saturday school. We have everything in place. We have no resources. And as a department, so we're a department, which is great, right? But we were founded as a shell. The Department of African American Studies, I owe my career to. They hired me before what I was doing became mainstream and accepted, right? They gave me the time and resources and the confidence to pursue my research objectives and plan courses that other people said would never work, like slavery and capitalism. And so I'm passionate about this department who raised me scholarly. You know, it's the only place that I've ever worked. But I've been chairing for 2 years, and what I've come to understand is we are poverty stricken, and it shackles what we can do and what we have the potential to do. We don't have any endowed chairs. I started the first fundraising committee. We've always just been in survival mode. Oh, you're a department, but you have no discretionary funds. Oh, you're a department, but you can barely pay enough TAs to grow out your classes, right? And so we've never been able to do what the department has the potential to do. And in the last few years, largely thanks to Justified Anger, someone I met in Justified Anger when I became chair reached out and said, hey, you've never asked me for a donation. And I said, I didn't know I was supposed to, because I was trained to be a historian. Long story short, she ended up giving us a seed gift that made the College of Letters and Science pay attention to us. And so we've been able to do things like open an education lab and hire a temporary communication specialist. Because before that, our website a year and a half ago looked like it was from 1994, and I am not exaggerating. Because we had no one to update our website. Right? And so we're trying to turn a corner. And we've been turning that corner, but then we get an administration at the federal level that is so incredibly hostile to education across the board that now we have to do reallocation exercises right as we're on the precipice of turning the corner. And so it's so very frustrating.
We've got about 5 more minutes.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Madison has always underfunded everything that we do. They've never given us enough money to even get out of the gate, but want us to be all-stars. I laugh when people look at my school and I'm like, do you realize that I have to raise 49.6% of my budget privately? That's why people don't see me. I'm living with my hand out. I'm living with my hand out all the time. But we'll have something to say about that one city schools over there if it doesn't get it done. So let's underfund it and see if they can survive. Yeah.
Please.
I know we got 5 minutes left to go. I want to appreciate the both of you all. And thank you for your story. Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do for our kids. So thank you. I work at the university, but before we moved to Madison in 2016, we lived in Toronto, Canada, for 11 years. And our son plays hockey. And Kaleem, you know this.
Oh, yeah.
Plays hockey. And when we were in Canada, he was really pretty good. And so one of the coaches for an advanced league invited us to dinner and tried to recruit this kid illegally. You aren't supposed to do that. And he asked our son this one question that stuck with me forever. He said, so Max, when did you first know you were the best person on the ice? When did you know that you were the best player on the ice? And Max hadn't thought about that, even though he was the best player on the ice. He had never thought about this. So that question has stuck with me. We're talking about helping students and young people know their value. I teach a class of 400 students called the Art and Science of Human Flourishing. And we have these small groups of students. I chose to work with the students that look like me, all 60 of them out of 400. And the first question I ask these students when they come to my small group is, when did you know you were the smartest kid in the room? When did you first know that you were the smartest person in the room? Now, I only ask that question because most of them have never been told they were the smartest person in the room. In fact, most of them have been told in various ways that they were the dumbest kid in the room, that they perhaps even shouldn't have been in the room in the first place. I only say this story, tell you this story, because I think what you all are talking about is trying to instill in our young people this sense of self, of being geniuses, being the smartest, the most capable, the ones who overcame. If you're at the University of Wisconsin, you did something, and you're a Black kid, you did something extraordinary, right? But no one has ever told them that. I ask them that same question every time we meet, every week. Because at the beginning, they don't know how to answer the question, but by the end of 15 weeks, they're able to articulate that moment when they knew, right? So if you get an opportunity, ask them the question, when did you first know? And you keep asking them the question until they know. You ask, when did you first know you were the smartest one in the room?
Thank you for sharing.
Just real quick, I mean, you've spoken about your tutors, Kaleem, and I've spoken with you previously. I mean, what you folks have done for volunteerism in your schools is fabulous, and I've been there. How do you engage the community in getting more of that, and particularly volunteers of color in getting in our classrooms and being face to face with our students? I mean, I'm a community engagement person, and I've racked my brain on that. So what would you advise?
We are now in the third generation of the achievement gap. So what happens in the third generation achievement gap with only 2% of Black people going to a university, most of the people that have the flexibility to volunteer and tutor have degrees. And there are so few of us in that category, and we are asked to be everywhere. So whilst you're in the room, we're tired. We get wore out because we're trying to be everywhere for everybody. So I have one Black tutor here and there every now and then. I get frustrated that I don't have more, but I also understand why. We're called, we're in so small number, we're called to do so much. And even before I came back with the Urban League, the highest jobs we had in this city were community relation jobs, diversity jobs, which I don't want to count those, but they're disempowered to do much. When I was looking for people who had operations, leadership ability, finance ability, et cetera, this city, this progressive city, has been a place that has lacked opportunity for us so long. There was no bench. And I promised not to bring people with me back from DC. So the problem is we just don't have enough people with the flexibility of time to volunteer. 80% of Black people in Dane County are federal poverty level poor. Those people are not homeowners. Only 17% of us own homes in Dane County. So, and that has not changed in 40 years. In 40 years.
I would like to say, all of that is true, right? If I put together all of the requests that I get, I would not have a job. Like I would not be able to work. But then I turn and I want you to look at these beautiful students who would love to do it. But can we pay them? When we pay them, can we build the bench? Instead of saying, well, we don't have them. Well, you know, the Department of African American Studies interacts with more Black students than any other department on campus. give us some resources so our students can be the tutors that those kids and those examples need. But we barely have enough to throw an end of the year celebration, right? Like we're trying to do these things on a shoestring budget and then being asked to cut more. And it is incredibly frustrating, right? Because those things are there. And these are, I think, exactly what your students need to see, right? They need to see them. They need to see these scholars. They need to see people pursuing MAs and PhDs, sitting and having a discussion with them. But we need to pay them to do it. We could only hire them for a third of the time this summer because we didn't have the money to hire them for half of the time this summer. And so again, you know, existing infrastructure is there, but we don't fund it.
I just want to say one last thing. You have to teach children to love themselves before they will learn for themselves. And the problem here is that we just want them to learn. Because the people who are teaching them aren't them, they don't look like them, and they don't believe that they have the capacity to teach our kids to love themselves for who they are. Our teachers need to do more work, and they should all be taking your courses. Every teacher in Dane County should be taking these courses that Justified Anger is offering.
And many of them have.
Many have, but they need to all do it so they feel comfortable and confident that they can help turn those lights on for our kids. Because once you start to do that, once you capture them and you have them start to see themselves as an achiever, now you can start building the learning excellence.
Teachers need to love the kids.
They do. The teachers, and they can't be afraid of them.
And the content matters. You know, I often get students that say, you know, they're not a reader, and then they take a seminar class that I have, and all we do is read books, and we read real books with lots of footnotes that are dense and heavy, and they become readers because it's about something that they care about, that they can see themselves in, right? And so the content matters as well. What are we asking them to read and engagement? You know, and I'm going to call out Lisa here because she's a friend of mine. Those, you know, she had asked me for a recommendation for books. And so I told her about this book written by Erica Armstrong Dunbar about Ona Judge, who was this enslaved woman that runs away from the Washingtons, evades them for 50 years. She turned her scholarly version into a children's version. And Lisa's kids sent me the sweetest notes and letters about how much they love that book. And as I was reading them, I said, they really read that book. And why? Because it connected with them, because she was a fugitive and she had to hide away. And guess what? There were kids in that class whose parents are living a fugitive kind of life, right? And so content matters, and the content is out there, but how many people are asking that kind of question? At least it was like, hey, what kind of thing can I really get to get them into like wanting to read a history book? Because I did not like history.
Madison, y'all, we can fix it. We just got to stop being scared. We got to fix it.
Show me the light, man.
What's the name of the
Show me the way.
Huh?
What was the name of the book again?
It's called
What's the author?
Never Caught.
Never Caught.
Never Caught by Erica Armstrong Dunbar. Now, there are two versions. I endorse both. The first is a scholarly version written for adults. I teach it in my advanced seminars. The other is one that I think is great for kids for about 4th grade to 7th grade. Would you agree?
I would say so, with a caveat of some of the language. Yeah, but yeah, can I share a funny anecdote about that? So, some of the.
I'm gonna get in trouble.
I see your face.
Okay, it was a group of, I think 7 of us, 5th graders, and one of them really is what we would call a struggling reader, but, you know, it was within striking distance for her, and she read it, and her comment about it was like, I need to tell everybody about what George Washington's problem was. You know, like,
Yes.
What is the source for your, for the evaluation of Florida, Texas, and Math?
NAEP scores. NAEP scores. NAEP, National Assessment Educational Progress, NAEP scores. run by the Department of Institute for Educational Sciences at U.S. Department of Education. It's the nation's assessment of education.
And that lines up with the other reality. So I'm working on a book about Black Wisconsin. And how I'm going to start out the book in the introduction is to remind folks, where are the greatest disparities between Black and white Americans? They are not in Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee, the places that people want to think they are. They are in Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, and Minnesota. These places that think that they have no history of racial oppression to overcome. That is not where the greatest disparities, and I'm talking about home ownership, incarceration rates, Black maternal health outcomes, the death rates of infants. No matter how you measure it, the worst disparities are in the Midwest. They are not in the Deep South, which is why right now, Black people are moving to the South in numbers. We are having a migration out of the Midwest and out of the North. And why are people going? Opportunity.
And they're becoming Republicans or independents. I sat with a bunch of my friends in New York. I was shocked. And the brothers were like, I'm voting for Trump or I'm not voting. Most of them weren't voting. They have lost the commitment to the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party has not produced real results for our people. In this city, I told Ben Whitler, whose kids went to my school. He pulled them out when he became state party chair. His kids went to the Two Rivers Public Charter School I helped start in DC that has the same model as me. And it was the optics, I understood it. His mom and McDonald and I were all friends. But in this state, I told him, you guys are gonna lose Wisconsin because all my friends in Milwaukee are saying they're not voting or they're not voting for you. Because they only come around on election time and then we suffer in between that time. All the businesses boarded up on the north side of Milwaukee, they're under Democratic leadership in that city forever. Why would we support that? Why would we continue to support an institution that is failing us? Our kids aren't performing 10% reading rates still in this state. 99% of our Black kids aren't eligible to go to UW-Madison. 93% are eligible to any college. Why would we continue to support that? But when we try to do something different, people who say they're our allies shoot us. I think Madison's got to think about that.
All right, that was a hard one to end on, but it is a really important truth to think about. I really love that that notion that the school, the students is more important than politics. The focus on making things happen, making changes, trying new things, trying things that actually work, and both of these incredible people are exemplars of that. So that is the end of this session. Unfortunately, we don't have any time for questions. In fact, the next session begins at 3:30 in the auditorium where we were earlier. Harry Hawkins will be giving a little bit of a speech there. So please take some time, go to the bathroom, do all of that, and then at 3:30 we'll be upstairs and on the third floor again. Thank you all so much, and please a big thank you for our panelists, including Caire.